Good morning, everybody. How are you? Good to see you all. And Nick, thanks for that kind introduction. Before I begin, I want to give my condolences to Pablo's family and to all his colleagues. I was very saddened to hear of his passing. He will always be remembered as a brilliant, caring, community-based person who loved his community, and it showed every single day. So we were very fortunate to have known him and to have been part of the work with him. In fact, it was in part because of who he was that I took it upon myself to advocate a bit for this project, because it was clear it would be in good hands. Before I start, I wanted just a personal reflection. When I was asked by Premier Wynne to take on municipal affairs and housing portfolio, I was very happy. I went home that night, spoke to my wife Barb, and I said, honey, would you ever have imagined that this North End Hamilton kid, first ever in his family to graduate from university, who had the privilege of serving as the youngest member of Hamilton City Council and later the mayor of the great town of Flamborough, and who wrote his master's thesis on how to eradicate homelessness in Canada. In your wildest dreams, would you have ever thought that I'd one day be named the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing? And she looked up at me with those big brown eyes I fell in love with 45 years ago, and she said, honey, you've never been in my wildest dreams. Anyhow, a little relief there. The province, of course, is pleased to support the Institute's transit and density research through the Places to Grow Implementation Fund. As our roads and highways grow increasingly congested, public transit becomes crucial to our continued economic viability and preserving a high quality of life. A Metrolink study found that in 2006, traffic congestion in the Greater Toronto-Hamilton area was already costing us $3.3 billion a year in the form of travel delays, increased negative impact to the environment, increased vehicle costs from travel delays, and increased chances of vehicle collisions. You know, in Canada, one person every hour dies as a result of a vehicular accident. 37 are injured every hour. Anyhow, that was on top of a loss of $2.7 billion in our gross domestic product due to workers being on the road instead of at work. That's a combined total cost of over $6 billion just for the Greater Toronto-Hamilton area. And it's only going to get worse unless we do something about it, right? Our region's economy and quality of life are drawing more and more people to this region. And Hamilton, this LRT discussion, I'm just going to depart from my notes for a minute. Hamilton needs to be connected. We're not going to have thoughtful economic growth, thoughtful, complete communities that integrate work and residential living and educational facilities and parks and everything else unless we're connected. Economic growth just isn't going to happen. And connectedness this isn't just the LRT, it's where the LRT connects us to, the GO stations to Toronto. So people from Toronto can come here and invest their time, talent, and hopefully their money in helping us build a stronger, more complete, caring community. Anyhow, I promise not to depart anymore. I was sort of wandering here a bit, given the current circumstances. Well, it's the LRT. So let me back up. No, let me go back to it. So back to we have to build, obviously, to accommodate our growing population. But the good news is this gives us an opportunity to direct growth in a manner that supports transit. That's where the Institute's new report can be very valuable. As many of you know, the province is currently conducting a review of 4 of the land use plans that will determine the future of the Greater Toronto, Hamilton, and Golden Horseshoe. We are seeking feedback on our proposed changes to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the Greenbelt Plan, the Oak Ridges Moraine Conservation Plan, and the Niagara Escarpment Plan. My ministry and the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry are leading this review with support from many other ministries. We began the review just over a year ago, and we were able to attract the Honourable David Crombie, tiny perfect little mayor who's had a lot of experience with watershed issues and others, to come and be the leader of that group. He did something absolutely amazing. I didn't think for 1 minute, I got to tell you, that there would be any consensus come out of this with that diverse task force we put together. You know, I deliberately picked people I knew wouldn't agree with each other, right? That's important. And they came back with solid and unanimous consensus on 87 recommendations, which we're now moving on. We had, in the context of that study, 17 public town hall meetings, and we reviewed, wait for it, over 19,000 submissions. Yes, it's right, really, I really did say 19,000 individual submissions. We also studied the report of an advisory panel, which I just mentioned, chaired by David Crombie. That panel presented, I think, the most thoughtful, comprehensive, futuristic planning document that's been produced in Ontario in the last 60 years. Anybody here read it? Couple. You should read it. It's the kind of book you can't pick up once you put it down, but it's a really, really important read. Through the proposed changes that the Crombie Group presented, the government is trying to achieve 6 specific objectives. We want to create complete communities in which people live and work and where businesses thrive. We want to keep goods and people moving around the region efficiently. We want to protect suitable lands for new and expanding businesses, employment lands. And we want to ensure farms continue to flourish. I don't know if you know this, but the leading contributor to Ontario's gross domestic product is the agri-food industry. You know, the Crombie report says a lot about wetlands and preservation of lands and what have you, but it's basically an economic development document. You know, he makes the case for protecting farmlands and wetlands and unique conservation lands as an economic imperative, and he's absolutely right. Absolutely right. So when I have to face down, as I sometimes do, a developer who wants to let me tell you a story. I got a letter from somebody up in Vaughan, a developer, who began the letter with the word "I." Now I don't know about you, but I learned early in college and university, if anybody begins a letter with the word "I," look out. And he went on, he said, "Minister, I need a favor from you. I have 289 hectares of Class 1 agricultural land, and I want to grow houses on it." They actually said grow houses on it. Right? And I'm wondering if I could swap 287 hectares of scrub land and water along the useless river valley that runs through some of my properties. Needless to say, the answer was no. I didn't say no. I got one of the staff to write a crafty bureaucratic letter. But you know, so when you come face to face, you know, we've got to stand up and we got to say, look, agricultural land in Hamilton is a $2 billion industry. The Hamilton area is precious. We need to protect it. Oh, that's number 4, so you can tell I'm a former Minister of Agriculture. There you go. 5th, we want to reduce the negative impacts of climate change. And finally, to ensure protections for natural areas and water resources. We've lost 87% in the last 40 years of our wetlands in Ontario. What a legacy, right? So that's quite a list, but I think I'll talk about only 3 of these objectives this morning. And I want to remind everyone that these revised plans at the moment are proposals only. We'll be holding a series of open houses across the Greater Golden Horseshoe, including one here in Hamilton, so that anyone interested can get a better understanding. They can look at the maps and ask questions of folk. So you get a better understanding of exactly what's being proposed. Which, by the way, we had an announcement about river valleys and creek valleys a couple weeks ago. You remember that? We added another 40% to the size of the greenbelt just by handling the blue belt in the wetland areas that should have been in the greenbelt to begin with. So that's phase 1. We have another 3 or 4 phases to go, and we'll get into that in the fall. I want to talk about complete communities. To create complete communities, we need to grow Ontario's communities in ways that attract jobs and investments to vibrant, livable urban centers. And we need to curb sprawl and lessen commute times by directing our growth to places that are already built up. My wife said to me this morning, I was struggling with my belt, she said, if you tighten that 1 more notch, you can curb some sprawl. It's always good to have an affirming person at home. We need infrastructure investments that help us make the best use of our limited resources. It can also reduce overall costs and shorten construction time. Those are all considerations we're taking into account as the government makes unprecedented investments in transit and infrastructure, including over $1 billion right here in Hamilton. Keenan, $1 billion. That's like what's that, 1,000 million? It's a lot of money. It's a lot of potential economic growth. Chamber supports that, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, just want to make sure I was in the right place. Okay. So, and the expanded GO services, ultimately to Stony Creek, shouldn't say ultimately to Niagara Falls, but we've got some rail line ownership issues we've got to sort out, and as our city friends are well aware of, so the high level bridge and some of the rail stuff there. So to curb sprawl, our proposed changes to the growth plan would direct a minimum of 60% of annual new residential development to already urbanized areas. It's affectionately referred to as intensification, right? We also propose to require development in greenfield areas to be planned for at least 80 residents and jobs per hectare. Now to park for a second, we're also going to include on the housing side an opportunity for cities, including our beloved Hamilton, to use inclusive zoning to incent, cajole, encourage the private sector to get involved in providing social housing. And we're going to require that every municipality have a plan around secondary units. And municipalities will be required to waive the second development fee there so as to encourage that. And that's important because a young couple each earning $40,000 maybe can't afford that $650,000 house. But if they can be guaranteed a revenue stream of $15,000 to $20,000, right? They suddenly can become homeowners, and that has a ripple up effect as they become homeowners. So we think it's good planning. The second thing I want to talk about is protecting lands for new and expanding businesses. Now, speaking of jobs, planning for and protecting employment areas is critical for economic prosperity. We're proposing stronger rules for municipalities to protect strategic employment lands for the long term. Those lands need to be in the right locations and available for business and industry when business and industry are ready to invest or expand. Now, often what's happened, there's a bit of a pattern I picked up as minister. Municipalities will have an employment zone set aside, and the investment isn't really coming as quickly as they want, so they move to rezone it, and they put something else in there, and then 10 years later they come back and they say, gosh, we've got an economic development opportunity that we now can't avail ourselves of because we don't have any employment lands. So we need to be very strategic about what we decide, what we select to be employment lands, and then stay the course, right? That's what, that's just good planning too. Put the industry and the growth where it needs to go. We need to keep goods and people moving. And that's a big issue in the Golden Horseshoe, as anybody who drives. I have a driver, thank goodness, because I couldn't do it every day if I had to drive into Toronto and back. And Michael, who's a Mac grad, and also has a master's degree in planning, is one of my best advisors. And then Mark Cripps is here as well. He's a media guru, right, of great repute, so he makes sure I don't get in trouble when I speak to groups like this, right? Am I in trouble yet, Nick? No? There is one section of our proposed revised growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe called Transit Corridors and Station Areas that I'm sure members of the Institute will be very interested in reading if they haven't already done so. This section sets out what upper tier and single tier municipalities would be required to do to determine the size and shape of major transit station areas and delineate their boundaries, in fact, in their official municipal plans. Now, this gets us into things like the OMB. Herman, you have an interest in this, I know. I think we're moving towards a situation with Bill 73 where when citizens get meaningfully involved in planning and when there's a local appeal body rather than the OMB, where something can't be appealed to the OMB until it's gone through the local appeal body. Not a lot of people picked up on this yet, right? And when an official plan is put in place and the province gives its blessing to that, be no appeal to the OMB of the official plan in its entirety. And in terms of secondary plans and variances, no appeal for 2 years. And ideally we'll see an OMB that will be much more into mediation and de novo stuff where that's appropriate, that's a legal term, where the process is not properly followed. But the OMB needs to be directed to give preference and deference to municipal decisions. And municipalities need to take their planning far more seriously than they do. Recent academic study indicated about 85% of all appeals the Ontario Municipal Board are the result of the city or the town or the village not doing adequate planning. It needs to change. So we're trying to equip municipalities with the tools to do that. As most of you know, land use planning in Ontario is a partnership between the provincial government and municipalities. The province sets out land use policies through the provincial policy statement and regional land use plans, such as the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoes. Municipalities then implement and enforce those policies and regional plans through their municipal official plans and zoning bylaws. Simply put, the province's job is to declare as best it can what we consider to be sacred. Protecting farmlands, wetlands, what have you. And then trying to identify with our municipal partners where the best places to grow are. Not just grow in terms of residential housing, but also business opportunities. And then we're the first government in history, I think, in Ontario to then template over all of that infrastructure investments. Right? Doesn't that make sense? Don't do this. Grow here. Here's the support you need in terms of infrastructure. That's good, solid planning. It's a joint effort, and I want to commend Joanne Hickey Evans, Manager, Policy Planning and Zoning Bylaw Reform, City of Hamilton. Take that back. For the terrific work the City of Hamilton is doing. Joanne is in attendance, I understand. We'll be speaking in a few minutes, and that's good. By the way, just an aside, I think the level of government that does the very best job on the social housing front is the municipality. All right? 2 senior levels have been lagging. The feds haven't been there at all. We've been dabbling. Now the stars are starting to line up. All right? There's still a few clouds in the sky we got to clear away. But we, for the first time in, I don't know, 20 years, we seem to have a shared sense of purpose. Before I conclude, I want to say just a bit more about transit planning. For our transit planning, we are looking at more than density requirements. We're also looking at multimodal access to the stations. We need local and regional transit services to be connected and integrated. We also need surrounding infrastructure that supports active transportation, including sidewalks, bicycle lanes, and secure bicycle parking. In addition, we need well-planned commuter pickup and drop-off areas. Ideally, you pull up, you get out, someone hands you free coffee, free newspaper, you make it a pleasant experience, right? It wouldn't take much. You might have to add a quarter to the fare. So be it. In conclusion, I want to again thank the Institute for its work and for its valuable report, which looks at the surrounding areas around transit that I was just talking about. And I encourage everyone here to visit the, if you got a pencil, you might want to write this down, Ontario.ca website, and look up Land Use Planning Review to read our proposed revisions. I also hope you all attend the Hamilton Open House on June 21st. I plan to be there and to listen as intently as I can to those who may have something to share. That meeting will give you all another chance to look over the province's proposed revisions to the 4 land use plans and to get answers to any questions you might have around what it means to be a complete community, around mixed use, around enhanced densities along transit lines, all of those pivotal things that the Crombie Task Force pointed us to. So until then, have a great summer, and we'll see you soon. And remember that website, Ontario.ca/Land Use Planning Review, where you can find all the details that I mentioned in passing today. And I'll end with that. No, I'll end with this. My mother used to say growing up that there are 2 kinds of people in the world, those that make a noise and those that make a difference. I'm pleased to be here this morning with so many difference makers. Thanks very much.